Risk, work, reward. We are going to look at Ecclesiastes 11 today, and Solomon has been writing in Proverbs mode now. We're going through the book of Ecclesiastes in a series we've called A Control Freak's Guide to Joy. So he's kind of going back into a Proverbs mode, giving a bunch of Proverbs since chapter 10. According to Noah Webster's original dictionary, the word proverb means a short sentence, often repeated, expressing a well-known truth or common fact ascertained by experience or observation, a maxim of wisdom. That's what Proverbs are. David Hubbard and Lloyd Ogilvie in their commentary say this: ours may be the first generation in civilized times that has not raised its young on Proverbs. From the beginnings of recorded history, in Egypt and Samaria, concise sayings which describe the benefit of good conduct or the harm of bad have been used to teach children how to behave. From the islands of the sea to China, from the Bedouin of the Arabian Peninsula to the Eskimos of Alaska, Proverbs have been a standard way of summarizing life's experiences. In our own country, both the biblical Proverbs of Solomon and the Anglo-Saxon wisdom collected in Poor Richard's Almanac by Benjamin Franklin have helped generations of parents coach their offspring in the art of successful living. Proverbs have been used throughout history. Benjamin Franklin's Almanac was an annual almanac that was published from 1732 to 1758. It was very popular in colonial America, and many of the phrases you all know, many of them come from Benjamin Franklin. Here's a few of them. Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Well done is better than well said. A penny saved is a penny earned. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. Honesty is the best policy. These are all from the Poor Richard's Almanac. Time is money. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And here's another one you may not have heard. 3 may keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. Hubbard and Ogilvie go on to add this. Even Ecclesiastes, who spoke so much to life's futility when people tried to make profit or pleasure or prestige or permanence their aim, used Proverbs to help students make their way beyond the futility, beyond the vanity he so forcefully described. How to be fruitful in a world where so many lives are barren was one question that he handled with Proverbs. So that is what he's doing in our text for today as well. He's giving us wisdom that comes in the form of Proverbs, wise maxims that guide us through an uncontrollable, unknowable, and unpredictable world. Philip Ryken says this: even when we do not know how God will use our work to advance his kingdom, we should continue to pray, continue to serve, and continue to hope, knowing that in the Lord your labor is not in vain. 1 Corinthians 15. The preacher takes this perspective in Ecclesiastes 11, where he tells us to live boldly, not letting the uncertainties of life hold us back from taking risks by faith for the glory of God. So that's what we're going to read about. Taking risks by faith to the glory of God. The better part of a spiritual wisdom is not caution, but courage through Christ. That's Ryken. And that's a good summary of what we're going to see in our text. Just because we can't predict what will happen tomorrow, that doesn't mean we should just give up and do nothing. We've been seeing throughout Ecclesiastes that life is unknowable. It's kind of outside of our control. We don't really know for certain what's going to happen, even tomorrow, even the next hour or two. But that doesn't mean we should just sit back and do nothing. Our conclusion to the book of Ecclesiastes should not be, if I can't control everything, I'm not going to do anything. That should not be our conclusion. In a world where you are not in total control, you're going to need to take risks. That's what makes them risks, because you don't really know. And you're going to need to have the courage to take those risks. Inactivity and passivity are not the answer to the vaporous nature of life. Solomon has been warning us about foolish actions. Now he's going to warn us about foolish inaction. Or because you don't really know, because it's a risk, you just do nothing. We've seen this. If you have kids, or if you've seen other people's kids, you've seen kids do this all the time. If they want to do something, and you say, no, you can't do that, a lot of times it's dropped to the floor, just nothing. They'll just, you can do this, you can do that, but not that. And they'll say, no, I want to do this. So it's inaction is the only answer if you don't get your way, if you're not in control of exactly what you want to do. See this in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 26:13, it says, the sluggard says, there's a lion in the road. There's a lion in the streets. It's another proverb. The sluggard. So we have to kind of use some wisdom to, what is he saying there? The sluggard, the lazy person, makes excuses. He just stays still. He doesn't do anything. He says, well, there's a lion out there. There's a lion in the streets. Instead of the boy who cried wolf, it's the sluggard that cried lion. So let's just dive into the text. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, starting in verses 1 and 2. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. When I was a kid in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, we used to go to the park and we would sometimes bring bread and we'd throw it to the ducks, right? Throw the bread on the waters. All the ducks would swim over and eat the bread, floating on the waters. But I never threw the bread upon the waters, hoping I would find it after many days. I don't remember ever, I like soggy sandwiches, but not bread on the waters. Be pretty soggy by then. So what does Solomon mean when he says, cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days? I know that prosperity preachers, the ones you would see on TV, they use this verse in order to tell you that when you give more money, when you send more money to them, you'll receive it back in all kinds of ways. You'll have more wealth, you'll have a better marriage, you'll have more healings, all kinds of other successes in life. Just give more money. That's what they interpret this as. I don't think that's what Solomon had in mind. After all, he already has been there and done that. Solomon had all the wealth, all the wisdom. He's already been there, done that. And his conclusion, as we've seen throughout this letter, is that all those things were vapor, mist, vanity. He's not contradicting one of the main points of this book here. Some commentaries think that he's talking about charity, almsgiving. Giving bread upon waters is giving to the poor who need help. So if we give help to others when they are in need, we eventually will get the help we need when we're going through rough times. That's one interpretation. And they'll quote words of Jesus in Luke 6:38, give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use it, will be measured back to you. Luke 6:38. So if that's the right interpretation, which it might be, then verse 2 would be talking about giving 7 or 8 portions to the poor. Give a portion to 7. This is in our text, verse 2. Give a portion of 7 or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. In Bible times and biblical times, it was common to share your feast with those who were in need, who didn't have as much. This is what they did when they were celebrating in Nehemiah the rediscovery of God's law. We looked at this recently. Nehemiah Chapter 8, verse 9 says, And Nehemiah, who was the governor, and Ezra, the priest and scribe, and Levites who taught the people, said to all the people, This day is holy to Yahweh your God. They were mourning, they were sad because they discovered God's law, and he's like, no, this is not the right response. It's time to celebrate. And it says, This day is holy to Yahweh your God. Do not mourn or weep. For all the people wept as they heard the words of the law. Then he said to them, Go your way, eat the fat and drink sweet wine, and send portions to anyone who has nothing ready. For this day is holy to our Lord, and do not be grieved, for the joy of Yahweh is your strength. Celebrate the law of God. And if those are not prepared, they don't have it, share a portion with them. To give a portion is to share food and wine and other necessities. To give 8 portions would be going above and beyond in the generosity realm. Then the end of verse 2 would take on a whole different meaning. Saying you don't know what disaster may come seems like it would make you not want to share more things, right? You give 7 or 8 portions to those who are in need, so you don't know what disaster may come. Well, that seems like not very motivating. I mean, if you think disaster's on its way, you're going to want to store up things. You're going to want to be prepared. I didn't look it up, but I'm sure when the Y2K thing happened, for those of you who remember that, when everybody's afraid that we're going to just everything was going to shut down, disaster was going to come on the world, people weren't giving more probably. They were probably storing more, getting prepared for disaster. So there's a couple other theories for what verse 1 means, but I think it is most likely talking about merchant ships, where you send your goods overseas for trading. Ryken explains, to cast one's bread upon the waters is to engage in international trade, sending one's grain or other produce out to sea and then waiting for the ships to return with fine goods from foreign lands. To find it after many days, therefore, is to receive the reward that eventually comes after taking the risk of a wise investment. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. That might be a Benjamin Franklin quote too, I don't know. Jeff Myers says this in his book on Ecclesiastes. It will help us to remember that during Solomon's reign, a great deal of bread came back to him over the waters. When Solomon ruled as king, Israel came as close as she ever did to fulfilling her divine calling to be a kingdom of priests, ministering to and serving the world. Israel was chosen not to exclude everyone else, but to bring blessing to all the families of the earth. Genesis 12. This meant Israel's stance needed to be outward facing. This happened rarely, if at all, before the period of wisdom and kings. With Solomon, we begin to see Israel taking up her calling. That's Myers. Listen to 1 Kings 5, starting in verse 1. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent his servants to Solomon when he heard that they had anointed him king in place of his father, for Hiram always loved David. And Solomon sent word to Hiram, You know that David, my father, could not build a house for the name of Yahweh, his God, because of the warfare with which his enemies surrounded him, until Yahweh put them under the soles of his feet. But now Yahweh, my God, has given me rest on every side. There is neither adversary nor misfortune. And so I intend to build a house for the name of Yahweh, my God. As Yahweh said to David, my father, Your son, whom I will set on your throne in your place, shall build the house for my name. Now therefore command the cedars of Lebanon, be cut for me, and my servants will join your servants, and I will pay you for your servants such wages as you set. For you know that there is no one among us who knows how to cut timber like the Sidonians. As soon as Hiram heard the words of Solomon, he rejoiced greatly and said, Blessed be Yahweh this day, who has given to David a wise son to be over a great people. And Hiram sent to Solomon, saying, I have heard the message that you have sent to me. I am ready to do all you desire in the matter of cedar and cypress timber. My servants shall bring it down to the sea from Lebanon. I will make it into rafts to go by sea to the place you direct. I will have them broken up there, and you shall receive it. And you shall meet my wishes by providing food for my household. So Hiram supplied Solomon with all the timber of cedar and cypress that he desired, while Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat as food for his household and 20,000 cores of beaten oil. Solomon gave this to Hiram year by year. And Yahweh gave Solomon wisdom, and he promised him, and there was peace between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty. So one of the reasons I think this is what he's talking about is because when the casting your bread upon the waters is talking about trade on merchant ships, is because we're told specifically in the Bible two or three times that Solomon participated in this overseas trading. Here's one of them, 1 Kings 10, verse 22. For the king had a fleet of ships of Tarshish at sea with the fleet of Hiram. Once every 3 years, the fleet of ships of Tarshish used to come, bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. You guys know it says that in the Bible? He sent out ships, and then they would bring back apes and peacocks, and ivory and gold and silver. Thus King Solomon excelled all the kings of the earth in riches and in wisdom. Solomon himself put his bread, his goods, on ships and sent them overseas. And it says he did this at least every 3 years. But think about the uncertainty in those days, right? The uncertainty of what's going to happen with all your goods when you send it out across the seas. The unpredictability of overseas trade in those days. You couldn't get your iPhone and use the Find My Ship app. See where your cargo was. There was no way of tracking it or communicating with it until it came back, until it returned. There was no delivery notification or text messages to track your trades. You wouldn't find out if the ship made it and came back with profit until many days. You would have no way of knowing if everything was lost from piracy or shipwreck or whatever. Michael Eaton explains it this way. He says, the first proverb, speaking of in chapter 11, the first proverb crystallizes the essence of the preacher's appeal. It is a call to a venture of faith. The allusion is to the element of trust in much ancient business. Did I say ancient right? My wife always tells me I say it wrong. Is it ancient or ancient? Ancient. I always say ancient. She gives me a hard time because that's not the way you say it. But I still say it wrong. Where was I? The allusion is to the element of trust in much ancient times, or ancient business. Ships on commercial voyages might be long delayed before any profit resulted. Yet one's goods had to be committed to them. Solomon's fleet, which brought back gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks, sailed once in 3 years. Similarly, the preacher has called his readers to take life as from the hand of God and to enjoy it despite its trials and perplexities. Such a life contains within it the elements of trust and adventure. Demands total commitment, for your bread is used in the sense of goods, livelihood, and has a forward look to it. You will find a reward which requires patience after many days. That's Eaton. Jeff Myers again says this. He says, of course, throwing bread onto water does not appear to be a rational form of investment. Solomon is issuing a call to be boldly generous and lavishly good to our neighbors. This is the epitome of wisdom, even though it looks like a losing proposition. Wisdom does not walk by sight, but by faith. Whoever is generous to the poor lends to Yahweh, and he will repay him for his deed. Proverbs 19:70. It comes down to whether or not we trust God to keep his word. We cannot control life and make our generosity come back to us, but God is faithful. Thus, when we look at the description of Lady Wisdom at the end of Proverbs we find she is provident, entrepreneurial, and known for her generosity to those who have needs. Solomon is saying that even though there's uncertainty in life, even though there's unpredictability in business pursuits, it's still worth it. Everything is a risk. Because of the vaporous nature of life, we still need to live by faith in the mundane things like investments and trading. Faith gives us courage to take risks in hopes of reward. But fear leads to passivity. Fear leads to inactivity and laziness. We see this in James as well. I've quoted this passage a couple times in this series, but it just fits so much with the book of Ecclesiastes. It's like a little mini version of Ecclesiastes in the book of James. James chapter 4, verse 13 through 17. It says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes." He's saying, you have plans. You want to go you have a year plan to go into such and such a place and trade and make profits. Then he says, but you don't know. Your life is a mist. You're not in control. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone a year from now. But he doesn't say don't make plans. He doesn't say you shouldn't have a yearly goal. He says this, instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. So if God wills, okay, this will happen. So when you cast your bread upon the waters, that's fine. It's a risk. So you say, if God wills, it will return to me, right? It's going to come back, and there's going to be a reward after many days. James says, as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it's sin. The answer is not inactivity. It's taking that risk by faith, doing what you think is right, making those goals, going after them, even though you don't know if it's going to return. So with that being said, I think verse 2 is just saying that it's wise for us to diversify our investments. Verse 2 says, give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. In other words, if you're going to send your goods overseas, if you're going to cast your bread on the waters, it's probably best to not put everything on one ship, right? Do it in different portions, 7 or 8. If you invest in one area and disaster comes, you lose everything. But if you have multiple streams of income, if you diversify, you'll be safer and stable financially. Risk should not lead us to inaction or to laziness. He's trying to say that even though you can't put too much stock in the uncontrollability and unpredictability of life, you still have to live. You still have to work. You still have to do what you got to do. You have to support yourself and your family. So you need to make sure your business transactions are wise. He's just recommending more wisdom in the area of business. Just because you don't know if you're going to make a profit on your investments through overseas trades, you should still courageously and faithfully take that risk. But he tells us it's wise to do it in portions. Don't put it all on one ship. Diversify. If you invest in one area, disaster may strike, but if you invest in 7 or 8 areas, you're more likely to not lose everything to disaster. It's like we would say these days, don't put all your eggs in the same basket. Because life is unpredictable, life is uncontrollable, and so you shouldn't put all your portions in one ship. Again, Reichen explains, in business, this would be called diversifying investments. Rather than focusing narrowly on a single product or service, many companies try to widen their interest. One of the main reasons for adopting this strategy is that you know not what disaster may happen on earth. Once again, Colette, the preacher, reminds us of the mysteries of the future and the many misfortunes of life: war, pestilence, famine, and financial collapse. Rather than simply taking our chances, we will plan for an uncertain and possibly unfortunate future. If we are wise, we will invest widely. Hopefully, if one investment does poorly, it will be counterbalanced by another source of revenue that is doing somewhat better. That's right. It's wisdom. It's just wisdom on display in the area of investments and work. The next thing he says is that whatever will be, will be. Things are outside of our control. He reminds us of this again. Verse 3 and 4 of Ecclesiastes 11. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will be. That's pretty profound, huh? If it falls north or south, wherever the tree falls, there it's going to be. It's like the old saying, wherever you go, that's where you're going to be. Then it says, verse 4, he who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. Craig Bartholomew explains. Verse 3 uses the images of clouds full with moisture and a falling tree to evoke the inevitability of bad things happening and their randomness. If clouds are full, it's inevitable that rain will come. If a tree falls, whether it falls north or south, a merism signifying everywhere or anywhere, there it is. And we have no control over it ending up where it does. Humans simply cannot control the future. So it's just another reminder that God is sovereign and we are not. I've said that a few times in this series. We've seen this truth already in the book. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. It's telling us that there is never a perfect time. If you're waiting for the wind to stop before you sow, or if you're waiting for the clouds to dissipate before you reap, you'll never get anything done. You just need to get on with your life and work. Not knowing the outcome is no excuse for inactivity. Life is unknowable, unpredictable. Get over it. Move on in spite of it. Kidner says the thought of verses 3 and 4 brings together again the things we can do nothing about, and those that call for firm decision and action. Two examples given here: the clouds, which follow their own laws and times, not ours, and the fallen tree, which has consulted no one's convenience, may start us thinking of maybes and might have beens, but our business is to grapple with what actually is and what lies within reach. Few great enterprises have waited for ideal conditions. No more should we. That's Kidner. We don't ever really know about life and what will happen, but that doesn't mean we should just give up, tune out, and just quit. Just do nothing. And this is what we see next in our text, verse 5. As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. The miracle that happens within the womb, when the Spirit comes into the bones of a child within the womb. We don't know how that works. You don't know how that happens, but it happens. God makes it happen. It says, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. He's sovereign. He's in charge. We just got to do what we're supposed to do and let him deal with the results. Life, or like life itself, it's a mystery to us. That's a great pro-life verse, though, too, as well. Spirit or soul comes to the bones in the womb. A person is a person in the womb. When the spirit leaves the body, we call that death. A human is a human being in the womb. It may be a clump of cells, but we're all clumps of cells. What we are. The point is that we just don't know how things happen. Things are mysterious, but life must go on. We must work and move forward. Verse 6 says, in the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, or whether both alike will be good. God is sovereign. I think Ian Provan explains this verse best. He says, given that reality is the way it is, the wise course of action is not to refrain from sowing and reaping, but to engage vigorously and continuously in these activities, knowing that some projects will succeed and some will fail. It is a recapitulation of chapter 9, verse 10. Whatever your hand finds to do, do with all your might. He's exhorting his readers not to give in either to the fear of failure or to the false promise of godlike success. At the same time, it's in its own way a call for distribution of risk. The person who knows he or she does not control destiny, yet launches into life with enthusiastic abandon, will know at least some reward. But the person who thinks it may be possible to control one's destiny and seeks somehow to avoid the risk inherent in living cannot know any reward. That's proven. In spite of the risk, work hard. Whatever your hand finds to do, do with all your might. And enjoy the reward. Stop being a control freak. Enjoy the ride. Risk, work, reward. Now to the King, eternal, immortal, invisible, to God who alone is wise, be honor and glory forever.